Hi, everyone, and welcome to our first learning series on participatory methods. I'm really thrilled to be joined by three amazing colleagues from the field. First, we have Maha Al-Sadi from the Empowered Aid Project in the World Vision Office in Jordan, focusing on the Syria response. We have Claude Cheetah, who's the Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning Manager at Right to Play. And then we have Ginwa Monzit, the Monitoring and Evaluation and Learning Officer in Right to Play's office in Lebanon. So I really welcome all of them, and I'm excited about their participation in this project. My first question, starting with Maha. So can you tell us about what kind of participatory research methods that you have used in your work?
Okay. So, as you know, now in Jordan, we're building on the participatory research completed in Uganda, Lebanon, and Bangladesh, and contextualize it to World Vision and Syria response programs in Jordan. So the aim of this research was to help us understand what kind of sexual exploitation and abuse our beneficiaries or our refugees are facing in their context. And then to also hear from them about solutions or, let's say, recommendations and how we can deliver our services as a humanitarian actors in a safe way or in a more, like, let's say, safer way. So what we did here in Jordan, we conducted conceptualization workshops with women and girls. We discussed many topics such as gender and sex, power, informed content, informed consent, gender-based violence, sexual exploitation and abuse. And we also shared with them the risks that beneficiaries faced in Uganda and Lebanon, and then heard back from them about the risks they face in their context and the most important recommendations they want us to work on. So basically, women and girls in these workshops were the experts who played an active role during the whole process. We also conducted participatory group discussions with men and boys using Empowered Aid participatory group discussion. We discussed also many topics related, of course, to sexual exploitation and abuse. We also did many exercises such as free listing and open-ended story. And men and boys shared with us many, let's say, stories or situation where they believe that women and girls feel unsafe or at risk.
Thank you so much. Ginwa, can you tell us a little bit about the participatory research methods that you have used in your work?
Hello again. So I'm Ghanwa Munzer. I'm the Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning Officer for Right to Play in Lebanon. So Right to Play in Lebanon and in Uganda are now working on a participatory research project that is mainly on the topic of gender-based violence and vulnerable communities. Specifically, we are developing and piloting participatory tools to be able to collect data from youth in vulnerable communities on gender-based violence, since we know that this is a very sensitive issue where youth usually do not disclose if they are being abused or they are in gender-based violence. So the participatory method is a way for them to be able to freely express so that we will be able to collect data from them without causing any harm. And the exact type of tools that we have developed and piloted so far are the vignettes, in which we would group the youth and tell them part of a story, which it would relate to their community. And then we would open a discussion around that story and wait for the respondents' feedback. This way, we can gather information about these youth, but through other characters. So they would be reporting on cases for the characters of the story, not about themselves. And this way, they could probably speak more. Other tools that we used are drawing through mapping safe and unsafe spaces. Through this tool, we were able to identify the locations in their community on which they felt safe or not safe, and we could open also a discussion there on why they felt this kind of feelings. So from there also we could identify what were the risks happening in each place. We also use journaling or writing with a bit higher age groups, where the youth were able to write down or list or even write a song when they were involved in the music project, for example, on a certain topic which they chose. Could be topics on early marriage, could be topics on career choices for males versus females. Again, we're talking about the gender-based violence. And a bit beyond the project that we are working on, we are trying to also discover other participatory methods and ways to evaluate. So we are now in another project digging more into using the digital storytelling to evaluate the impact of a certain project on the youth, also as a part of the youth being the center of the whole evaluation process, where they are able to express freely what they really want to say through a participatory way.
Thank you so much. Claude, do you have any additional reflections on participatory methods that you've seen?
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Claude Cheta. I'm Global Manager, Monitoring, Evaluation, and Learning at Right to Play. I've said that in the past, we used to limit our use of participatory method. We used to say participatory, but actually we're doing just focus group and key informal interview. But since we started working with Global Women Institute, we have expanded our scope. And the one we have used more, I will see, for example, the vignette that has been mentioned, the drawing, and the mapping. I think we have used the drawing, for example, to draw safe and unsafe space. When we are doing some research on gender-based violence in Uganda, we just say, please, on a piece of paper, can you draw which space you feel safe? And then people will express themselves in a more natural way. We have used the mapping to better understand gender roles in the community and in the household. For example, asking adolescents, when you come back from school, what do you do? Just draw on the map activity that you are doing. And that was very significant in terms of helping adolescents to express themselves in the way that a simple focus group discussion, a simple questionnaire survey would not have highlighted. And also using, for example, the vignette. Sometimes people want to speak about something, but they don't want to speak about themselves. But when you create a story where it's about somebody else, but at the end of the day, they are talking about themselves. And that gave the opportunity to have some group dynamic where people are discussing, interacting, and influencing, and that trigger some conversation about what is happening in their personal life, in their family, and in the community. So it has been really interesting to dive into engaging with the youth in participatory method that empower them and help us understand why what is happening and how this is happening in their community.
Thank you so much, Claude. I really appreciate that reflection on your part. So moving on to our next question, and this time I'll start with Ginwa. So how do you see participatory methods as different from other kinds of research methods?
From our experience, I think how participatory methods are different from other research methods. I could think of two main points. First, it's fun. It's really fun for youth and for even older people to be involved in participatory approaches. Specifically here, I'm talking for data collection, where they are really entering the session to participate in an activity. That's a fun activity, and not just sitting there answering questions. So it's we've seen that it's really fun. They were enjoying their time while they are sharing their experiences and talking about the topic. And the second point is that it is less invasive of the participants privacy, where, as we mentioned earlier, those approaches allow the participants to talk about probably other characters, while in fact they are talking about their own experiences, or they could draw or write something, and we always make sure not to include their names or any identifiers on the sheets of paper, and at the end they would we would gather all the drawings and talk about them in general all together, so they would really feel safe that they didn't talk about their experiences, but they put it down on paper and it's taken into consideration. So these two, I think, are what really differentiates the participatory methods.
Great. Anything from your end to add to that, Claude?
Yes, I think for me, the most important point is the ownership of the evidence that we generate. I think when we use participatory method, I think the evidence that we generate is owned by project participants. It is their drawing. It is their story. We are just enabling them to express that story in using their own word, using their own pictures, and using the mechanism that they really want to use. So the ownership is there. And they're the one leading, actually. You choose what you want to draw, you choose what you want to map, and choose what you want to put it. That is greater ownership and greater engagement. And the second point is about the depth of what we understand. Because sometimes you may have a survey just giving you some percentage about something happening in the community. But using participatory method, we can go a little deeper to understand what is happening, how this is happening, and we can deconstruct some mechanism on changes in the community. So in terms of, yes, there is a greater ownership, a deeper understanding of what is happening, but also a better chance of engaging project participants in the change process itself. So it's not just limited to doing research or doing just generating evidence. It's a change process through research.
Great. Thank you so much, Claude. And then Maha, from the Empowered Aid perspective, I'd love to hear your reflections on this.
Yes. Well, I think the unique and the key feature of using participatory methods is the power we give to participants in decision-making and implementation. We treat them as experts, we hear their concerns and their priorities, and we act accordingly.
Thank you so much. And I think that leads perfectly into our next question. And I'd love to kind of delve into this in a little more detail with each of you. But how do you think participatory methods help break down the power differentials between researchers or NGO workers and participants? And this time, I think we can start with Claude.
Yes, I think there have been a big shift in the power dynamic when we do research. In previous way of doing research, people were just extracting information from people and using the information in the way they don't even know what we are going to do with the information. So they were just subject of the research. Now, when we say participatory research, we define altogether what we are going to, why are we doing the research? We define altogether. So there's been a process of empowerment of the research participant in the participatory research. They own the why we are doing the research, they own what we are researching, they own the content of the research, and at the end of the day, what is the use of the research? They're going to use that research to advocate for their right. So it's a big process of empowerment, and we could even realize that some of the adolescents who have been doing the research will find other job opportunity because of the expertise that have been developed through this research. So there is empowerment, there is ownership, there is a big process of social change, and there is also income generation opportunity for them who have been expert in some area. So that is a value expertise that can be used even after the research has been completed.
Thank you so much on that. Maha, from your perspective, what are your reflections on how we can break down power differentials using these methods?
So I think that they help break down power differentialities through the collaborative participation and inclusion of participants. We give the participants high levels of participation and control, simply because they understand many aspects of their situation better than anyone else. So we enable the participant to play an influential part in shaping the decisions that affect their lives. This means that we not only listen to them, but also they we hear them and we try to take their voices to shape our outcomes.
Great, thank you so much. And Ginwa, yeah, do you have any final reflections on this question?
I think in participatory research, the researcher is no more the center of the process. So the participants are. So if we just think of a traditional focus group discussion and how it is usually done, the researcher is mainly, or the facilitator is the center of the whole discussion, where all participants are looking at him or at her and waiting their question until they respond. And as Maha mentioned also, there's the dynamics between the group where participants who by nature can talk more would usually control the setting, and their ideas are maybe imposed on others where that are less talkative in the group. While in the participatory methods, we can see that we are just, as researchers, giving them the tools to express in different ways, and everyone would get equal chances of expressing. We wouldn't at all be the center of the process. We would just facilitate, how they are doing things, and they are just on their own expressing, sharing their experiences without having anyone owning the opinion over the other.
Great, yeah. And thank you all for all of those reflections. I think we've done a really good job of thinking about some of the really exciting parts of participatory methods and some of the real sort of advantages of using these approaches. But of course, everything's not perfect. And these methods can also be challenging. So maybe starting with Maha, I'd love to hear about what you find challenging about working with participatory methods.
So I believe that the only challenge is that sometimes it can take time for participants to feel comfortable with these kind of approaches because unfortunately, most of the times they are, let's say, used to passively receive information from outside experts rather than being playing an active role during the process. But on the other hand, I believe this is what actually makes this method very, very unique. I literally cannot forget how happy and very powerful the participants felt at the end of the workshops. So I think these kind of tools literally can change thoughts and behaviors of others.
Thank you so much for that. Ginwa, what are your reflections on some of the challenges?
I would talk from a project perspective. So usually time could be a barrier if there's not enough time to train the researchers or the enumerators that are going to collect this data on the proper ways to do a participatory approach. This could be a limitation. There could be also the challenge of managing the session while it's participatory, because everyone, all consultants that we have, all enumerators that we work with are usually trained, and they really know well how to manage a traditional focus group discussion per se, but they need further training to be able to manage the group, and especially if we're working with children or youth, doing a participatory approach and to really guide the activity and the discussion, if there was a discussion there, in a way to collect what we need of data and not turn it into just a game where they are not really putting down the data that is needed. And the last point would be that something that we faced is that during participatory data collection, participants were at ease sharing a lot of information to the point where they disclosed some really sensitive issues. this this was hard from a point where we were now obliged, after hearing what they said, to act directly, to do referrals. So the whole team and the whole project team needs to be trained on how to deal with cases when a sensitive issue is being disclosed, especially as we said that through the participatory method, they would feel free to disclose more than what they would usually share if they are talking only about themselves.
Thank you so much for those important points, Ginwa. Claude, do you have any final reflections on this question about challenges?
Yes, I think Ginwa has rightly mentioned the biggest challenge we have faced at Right to Play using participatory method, which is disclosure of sensitive issues. At Right to Play, we use participatory method to better understand issue of gender-based violence, what's happening in the community. And through the approach, we have created a safe environment where adolescents can speak and speak freely. But when they speak, sometimes they say things that we are not always prepared and equipped to address. So when somebody discloses some sensitive information, what do we do as data collector or as a project? Because we are committed to understanding, but sometimes we have not put in place mechanism to address all the issues that are being disclosed. So we need to have, a challenge is not limit ourselves to just collecting the data, but be prepared to liaise with other organizations. We need to have a holistic approach to the situation where we collect data, but also have enough capacity to address any issue that will come from any evidence that we generate. So we have evolved, and we are evolving from just data collection process to also integrating that in the program quality, addressing the issue, referral, and coordination with other stakeholders that are in the locality where we are generating information. So it's that has widened our scope and also draw our attention on what is needed to collect data in a safe way. So we have committed as principle to always give priority to the well-being of project participants rather than collecting data at all costs. So we need to be aware of that. If collecting data is going to generate more trauma, more harm than not collecting, it's better not to collect. So this is a very important principle that we have become aware of.
Yeah, thank you so much for that really candid reflection, Claude, because I think it's a really important point. And when GWI, when we're talking about these issues, we often say that ethical decisions are not separate from methodological ones. And we have to be thinking about ethics and safety throughout all of our processes. And so I definitely appreciate your reflections on some of the challenges that come along with making people feel free to talk more openly, because you'll also hear things that maybe you weren't expecting or not equipped to address. So thinking about those things early and putting in procedures and policies in place, and yeah, not collecting data when it's not safe to be collected. I really appreciate all those points. So thank you for that. And then just finally, so my final question for all of you, and I'm going to be starting with Ginwa on this one, is just, what advice might you have for others who want to start using more participatory methods in their work?
It's a method worth exploring. It's a method that you can really get some meaningful, deep data through without causing any stress to the participants that are involved in this activity. And some main things to take into consideration is the importance, I think, of piloting the tools before actually using them, because it really differs across communities. We found that even across communities of the same geographical location, but some specific components or values of certain communities make it different to use certain tools or the others. It also differs across age groups. So for some age groups, you might find that certain tools would work better than the others. It really differs also whether we were working with communities who were able to read and write and other communities who were not. It was also a bit different whether the facilitator was of the same gender of the group or from different gender. again, in our case, we were talking about gender-based violence. So there are several things to consider, and piloting, I think, is a really needed step to really identify what tools will work and will allow you to collect the data you are intending to collect.
Thank you so much. Claude, final advice for anyone who wants to use these methods.
I have two very important final advice. First is about flexibility and adaptation. So when you collect data in the specific location and you move to another location, always adapt on the tools, on the process, and everything you do. Always listen, because although you have the initial tools, always adapt the language, the content, to the local context, to the age group, or to the actual community. Even the example that you are using should reflect the culture of the community where you are collecting data. That is the most important, flexibility and adaptation. The second advice is, although we say we are using participatory methodology, it's important to use that in synergy with other potential approaches. I'm a big fan of combining qualitative data with quantitative data. Sometimes we need to understand what we are doing and then to deconstruct how this change is happening. So I will say it's important to collect and quantitative data, but also finally collecting data with the intention to do something, not just collect data and disappear. It's a big engagement in the community. It's a change process. So collecting the data with the responsibility to make something happen as a result of evidence that has been generated. Even if we cannot do something immediately ourselves, but at least to advocate for something to happen or for some change to happen with project participants at the center of this change.
Thank you so much, Claude. And then Maha, you have the last word. What advice do you want to give to others who want to be using these participatory methods?
Well, I would give them one piece of advice. Always remember that everyone has the right to play a part in shaping the decisions that affect their lives. So try to maximize participation. Also, using participatory methods involves seeking out unheard voices and creating safe spaces. It's often people who share the least are the most affected. So we need to ensure having a safe space and building a trusted relationship with your participants in order to encourage them to share more and more.
Thank you so much. I think that's a perfect way to end this discussion. And I really appreciate everyone's time. And I hope that anyone who's watching these videos learned a lot about using participatory methods in the field. So thank you all.